Hi, welcome to Promo Insiders, a podcast from ASI Media that covers the topics that matter most to the promotional products industry. I'm CJ Mitica, ASI Media Editor in Chief, and today we're discussing our biggest project of the year, Counselor's annual State of the Industry issue. In this episode, we'll look at the most eye popping statistics from the report and the biggest trends that are turning the promo industry on its head. I'm joined by Nate Kuzma, ASI's Executive Director of Market Research and Corporate Marketing, and Chris Rubo, Digital News Director, to unpack all of it. Gentlemen, welcome.
Hey, CJ.
Siege.
How's it going, guys?
Yeah, excited to talk some SOI. There's so much good stuff in here I think is going to be of interest to people.
Yeah, this is the first, it's once a year. Once a year we get to, only once a year can you release it. So I'm always excited when we do that.
Guys, when we did in practice, there was more enthusiasm. It's not showing through. We need to do it again. Just kidding, Melissa. Don't edit that out. No, we're excited to talk about SOI. Last year when we do it, and it nearly put Nate and the rest of us in the grave. So this year was a much more seamless process, thankfully without a pandemic to wrench our carefully laid plans. Of course, it is our biggest issue of the year. We spend months researching it, reporting it. And we're going to today dive into the biggest statistics and topics that are of interest. But before I start, just a couple notes. You can access our full report a couple ways. So if you're a print subscriber, you will get it in your mail in probably right about now when this episode comes out. And if you're a digital subscriber, you can go to asicentral.com/SOI 2021. Or go to our homepage; it'll be plastered all over. You won't be able to miss it. So just to start off with, guys, and Nate, we can start with you since you spearhead this report from the beginning. What was your biggest takeaway from this year's SOI survey?
It's interesting because every year you go into this study. We've been doing this study going on 15 years now, I believe, and I've been involved in it for about 7 years now. And there's always very minor changes every year because you kind of know what's going to happen, right? This industry, while it changes, it doesn't exactly change greatly unless there's a big disruptor to the industry. Well, we had that this year, right? And it's the first time that any of us have ever actually lived through it. So I don't know that I would necessarily say it was a surprise as much as I would say I had no idea what to expect this year when we fielded the study. One of the joys of my job, and I legitimately mean this, is that I try not to make judgments about what I think is going to happen because I'm going to be wrong, right? Mm-hmm. This year, I didn't even have to make that conscious decision because I had no idea what was going to happen. I didn't know what the leading markets were going to be. I didn't know what the leading products were going to be. I didn't know what was going to happen in terms of profit margins or turnaround time or anything like that. We get to see all that, and it was it's a different year than any one that I think we've ever experienced. So I guess you could say my biggest surprise is that everything, because we didn't know what was going to happen, and that's what this report really shows. It really was an unpredictable year.
Yeah, and I agree that certainly this year was far from business as usual when it comes to the findings of this report. Chris, what about you? What was your biggest takeaway?
Mine, first off, I would concur with Nate. I was going to give a similar answer, saying that this was it wasn't quite a tabula rasa blank slate, but in some ways it was. We just didn't know, what was going to come back. We had some sense, that it wasn't good, obviously, from all our reporting for the past year, but the particulars we had to fill in, and it was very hard to hedge your bets ahead of time. So I would agree with that it was just, what the heck is happening here? But in a positive sense, I would say maybe my biggest takeaway is that the industry was, quote, only down 20%. And I think given that, the lifeblood of what so many of distributors do, which is selling for events and providing merchandise tied to some kind of in-person happening, that completely was obliterated and went off the map, right? For most of 2020. The fact that the industry was collectively down, I think it was 19.8% to be exact, was actually quite remarkable and spoke to how much our industry, pivoted to other types of solutions for clients, which I know we're going to get more into later. But I was impressed by that it was only down 20, where there was a point in the year where I was doing reporting where executives were anticipating 50%
For
drop
sure.
for the industry year-over-year sales, and some at points last year experienced 80% drops in their particular business for periods of time. So the fact we're only down 20, I think, is a big takeaway and speaks to resiliency.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you like just look back at the entirety of 2020 and to sum it up in one figure, it really doesn't tell the whole story. And obviously Nate was privy to this by measuring the results of the industry month by month and quarter by quarter. But to say, look at the end, say 20, just down 20%, it's like as if it were a straight line. When in reality it was a roller coaster
Yes.
that people were holding on to for dear life.
Yes. Right.
Yeah,
I think second quarter last year, right, Nate, was down almost 45% for that quarter year.
44.4%. It was it was
Yeah.
up through Q1 of 2020, right, when it was down about a little bit under 6%. That was the first time since I've been working at ASI, and that dates back to Q1 of 2014, that we actually did not report a increase. I mean, we reported some small increases, 1.5%, 1.9%, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But this was the first time where I actually had to report to the leadership of ASI, we're down.
Yeah.
The industry is down, and that just sort of set the stage for Q2 when it was it was a bigger crash than I think anybody could have believed. Obviously, in the moment, we knew it was going to be bad. But when the metrics came out and the research was rolling in, it was just it was incredibly eye-opening.
It's like one of those things where, at least in an industry-specific sense, it's going to be like how people experienced the 1929 stock market crash. It'll be like, where were you when that happened? And it'll be one of those things that's like a demarcation line that people in this industry will talk about, almost forever for the foreseeable future going forward. That quarter. Yeah.
And I like the idea of a demarcation line because it really sort of informed the reporting that we did this year, and just sort of how I think our readers should approach our stated industry package. Because it's really sort of a moving target. So we have data from 2020, and in some cases like that tells us a story that's going to continue into this year and beyond. In other cases, though, I think we're going to look at it as sort of a very as an isolated anomaly, a one-time blip. And I think the trick is to determine, well, okay, which of these trends are going to continue for the foreseeable future, and which ones aren't, and that's why, and I think that's something we're going to talk about when we talk about all these different topics and concerns. The interesting thing, the first topic that I want to bring up is something that wasn't really a concern last year, but was born out of the pandemic, and that's the supply chain crisis, the problems we're seeing right now with inventory.
Thanks, guys. This has been fun. I'm heading out now. I mean, I'm living this 25 hours a day right now.
I know. Chris is our boots on the ground, our eyes in the sky. He's got it covered every which way. So I want to start off with this first chart because we know how bad it is, but it was interesting to see the numbers behind it. So we'll start off with this first one, which we can just leave up for a second here. So which of these issues have been a growing concern over the past 6 months? And we reported this earlier this year when we got the results. 95% of respondents agreed that apparel shortages, hard goods shortages, and hard goods prices were a growing issue. 91% said apparel prices were a growing issue. So that's pretty prevalent, I would say. Nate, I know you reported these numbers. They're not shocking, but what do you think about these totals?
First off, they are shocking to me. Like, anytime you get a number at 90% or above on anything, right? That's staggering.
Mm-hmm.
God, looking back for this, man, I wish we would have had the forethought to ask these questions in 2019, so we had something to compare them to, right?
Sure, yeah. Right.
But those are huge numbers. Normally when something gets above like 75%, that's of a concern to a specific audience, whatever that audience is, right? Then it's something to really pay attention to. It's above 90%. Listen, that's near universal at that point. That's a census, right? Everybody's saying it. So that's what I would say with that. Those are staggering numbers. Now, when we do this again next year, maybe it'll get maybe I can't get much worse, right? Maybe it'll get a little bit better. We'll find out. But yeah, those are incredibly large numbers, and that means those concerns are being felt by everyone in the industry.
Mm-hmm. So, Melissa, feel free to take down the chart now. Melissa Newman is the woman behind the board controlling everything. So, thank you, Melissa. Chris, though obviously you're, like you said, you're living and breathing this stuff. What's the current situation, and how do those numbers resonate with what you've been reporting?
Yeah, I think the data speaks for itself, and it certainly bears out what we're reporting, on a twice weekly basis almost now, from distributors and suppliers. What it really boils down to is that the global supply chain, and that goes far beyond just the promo industry, is broken. There's just too much demand to get product from overseas where they're made to North America here where they're sold. And there's also too much demand on raw material inputs. So when you have massive demand for shipping containers and shipping space, massive demand for raw materials, it drives up prices exponentially, and it delays production, maybe not exponentially, but significantly. And what that's resulting in for our industry is inventory shortfalls, right? You just can't get the product here fast enough to restock, and it's making it much more expensive for suppliers and distributors who import directly to create and fulfill product. So it's being felt universal. It's not something our industry can control. It's only something that you can mitigate to a degree. And as of right now, it's anticipated that the fourth quarter could get even a little bit worse than what was seen earlier this year. And the reason for that is we're ramping up toward the holiday season, where all your major retailers and everybody who imports is really looking to import massive amounts of inventory to be prepared for what's expected to be a pretty booming holiday season across the economy because of the economic recovery that's happening in the U.S. So I don't know if that's more than you wanted, but it kind of lays out like just where things stand. It's leading to inventory shortfalls, rising prices, and as of right now, I wouldn't expect any of those things to abate before sometime in 2022.
So basically, to sum up what Chris just said, buckle up. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Make sure your airbag works. Yeah.
So I want to look at the next chart we have on this topic, because I think it's my favorite. It's like my favorite favorite story in this whole thing. So the first one looks at the percentage of orders requiring 5-day turnaround or less. So basically rush orders, right? Mm-hmm. Well, in last year, rush orders dropped 9 percentage points from 37% to 28%. So only a little more than a quarter of the orders were rush orders, and yet the percentage of late orders increased 4 percentage points from 10% to 14%. So all the time that I worked in this industry, it's been rush orders are the cause of all these errors and late orders because suppliers are being pushed to turn them around quicker, and yet the rush orders lessened last year, and we're still seeing these issues. So I'll start with you, Nate. Is this just a supply chain issue? Like why did that happen?
Oh man, this is a lot of issues here. I mean, so the thing that the thing that comes out of this is also, for the last several years, and there's been a few variations here or there, but it's been pretty consistent, right? Almost straight line, that the percentage of rush orders has steadily increased. The percentage of orders that people needed within 5 days has steadily increased. That's always been one of the mantras that we've always looked at, right? How the percentage of orders and the speed of orders needed to keep increasing. However, with that said, the number of orders that were delivered on time or on the obverse delivered late had stayed very, very similar over the years, almost like unchanged.
Sure.
You would know, when you throw those numbers in and then you see, well, the percentage of number of orders that were, had to be rushed went down. Well, you would think that, logically thinking, right, that the number of orders that were delivered on time would have gone up. It did the opposite. And I think that speaks to things that, again, are somewhat within the control of this industry, but really might not be in some cases, right? It's shipping delays. There have been large-scale shipping delays that have not only impacted our industry, but have impacted the entire economy. That's an issue. also, and this is not a surprise, there's labor shortages at suppliers. Distributors were somewhat more able, I guess you could say, to ramp up quicker, especially if they're small businesses. They did not have, generally speaking, mass layoffs. They didn't have furloughs. They didn't have people who said you can't come to the office and therefore, we have no orders. But, when business came back, they were able to ramp up and get back to speed reasonably quickly. Suppliers, they had to furlough people, especially in Q2. If they were not involved in PPE, they didn't have business, right? Let's just throw that on the table. That was Q2 of 2020 was PPE central. And if you had to furlough people, they could have gotten other jobs at that point. And, now you're at the point where, depending on what the rate of pay is, if these people are collecting unemployment, it's hard to get them back without, again, increasing the pay dramatically. So it's been a much harder road to haul for the suppliers to get back up to speed. So listen, I'm not blaming the suppliers. This is beyond their control in many cases. But it's a reality that it's something that went the opposite of what what one number would suggest, and I don't know that it's going to be abating anytime soon.
Chris, what's your view on the situation?
It's hard to have anything to add to that. I think Nate hit it right on the head. I think I would emphasize, just maybe re-emphasize that even if suppliers are getting that, they have the inventory, get it produced and decorated and staged to go out the door. Once it leaves, it's ultimately up to that carrier to get it to its destination on time. And unless you've been living under a rock, you know that FedEx, UPS, USPS are having massive struggles in getting things on time because of the huge increase in e-commerce that's happened in this nation, and they're just making so many more deliveries of little packages here and there, one-off deliveries, that their networks are essentially overwhelmed. So it's not that a supplier is skimping or necessarily being lazy. They might be getting everything ready to go on time, but it just might not be getting there. That said, it can't all be put on the carriers. There's the very real reality that Nate laid out, that there are labor shortages, and to that I'd add, this is more of an issue last year than this year. But in 2020, suppliers had to be careful about COVID. They were, in the second quarter, they were trying to keep some kind of operations going. When we were having 50, 60, 70, 80, 100,000, new cases diagnosed a day. So you had to be very careful about how you ran your workplace. So you couldn't just be going full tilt there the way that you normally would. So that obviously slowed things down as well. So I think when you combine all those factors together, you get those numbers that you see there, CJ.
Yeah, and it was mentioned. Obviously, staffing has been a major concern. That's it's infecting late product delivery. It's also infecting customer service, and we hear it anecdotally about sort of the rising annoyance or even animosity that's occurring between distributor and suppliers, that they're both sort of kind of fed up with the other distributors because they can't get the quality customer service that they expect, and the lack of communication. And suppliers have told us just basically that distributors are just failing to give them the wider berth that they need during these difficult times, and it's really sort of affected the relationship currently.
And you want to know what? I have to say, and neither of them are wrong. Because
Sure.
If I'm a distributor and I have an end client breathing fire down my neck because they need an answer on what something's going to cost and if something's available, and I can't get them that answer in fast time, the end client's not thinking or caring, frankly, about that the supplier is not responding to me with the information I need. They're just thinking I'm a bum who's not, as the distributor, who's not helping them. But then on the supplier side, they're saying, we're 10 people short in our customer service department. We're doing we're working round the clock and paying overtime to keep people around to try to service, but we just literally can't we physically can't get to everybody. So I think both sides are just feeling so much heat from their respective customers, and there's just at this point not a ton that you could do to correct it fast, other than if you're the supplier, as Nate mentioned before, just pay super exorbitant rates to try to attract personnel in to serve in those customer service roles.
Mm-hmm. So this, I think, these issues, the supply chain issues, the sourcing issues, it leads into the next topic that I want to touch on. If Melissa, you could bring up the next chart, that would be great. this deals with the countries that the suppliers and distributors are sourcing from, particularly China. China has been the predominant source in this industry of importing products, but as we see, it's coming in from other countries. And here's the statistic that I'm referring to: 58% of suppliers have actively explored sourcing from new countries in the last 12 months, new countries besides China, due to uncertain trade situation with China. There's obviously a lot of factors going on. We asked that question sort of in a sort of tariff-related, sourcing-related way. Obviously, there's a whole lot of factors. Chris, you wrote the article that appeared in our SOI issue. You're quite familiar with the current situation. What's the current mentality as far as China and looking at alternatives outside China?
All right. So the mentality is among your more proactive suppliers and distributors who source from abroad, we need to move some production out of China, and they are. They're a great example. There's a company in Philadelphia, Pop Promos, they're called. I think a lot of folks would be familiar with them. They just in June 2020 they started sourcing from India, and it went so well that they set up like a satellite office there to do that. And in a lot of ways, that move is representative of what a lot of suppliers are doing there. They are moving some production out of China because for a variety of benefits. Hey, we know the trade situation with China can be a little dicey. There's tensions between our countries, unfortunately, right? And that affects the business of importing. There's also just, if there's a natural disaster, or as we saw at the beginning of COVID in 2020, if there's COVID outbreaks that shut down factories, it's better to have a little bit of diversification at the least in your sourcing. All that said, China is ruling the roost still, and will continue to rule the roost, because their infrastructure that they have there, the raw materials that they have there, the producers that they have there, there's no one else in the world that can match them yet, or really likely anytime soon. Now, I think if you're in the business of apparel manufacturing, it's a bit easier and probably more advantageous to move to other countries, because it's with apparel, labor is your biggest labor costs are your biggest input, so you can get cheaper labor in other countries. But for certain hard goods where you need less labor and it's not necessarily your biggest input, China is likely to remain the ruler of that kind of manufacturing for quite a bit. All that said, though, there is growing diversification where China will compose less of our manufacturing share, but will still be by far the majority.
Yeah, when we looked into this, I'm trying to avoid the sunlight coming in through the various windows in my house right now.
You have the sun there? Good for you. It's ready to thunderstorm here.
Keeps sliding around. It's everything Chris said is spot on. I think that not only our industry, but America, right? We kind of got too dependent on one country prior to this happening. Everything was China. It was cheaper. It was, that's where we're going with. We're not going to spend any time to build up some time and money to build up supply chain diversification. And so, we got a hard lesson in that back before COVID hit us. When it hit them, you hope this lesson's been learned. I do. I mean, for our industry and our economy, I hope this lesson has been learned, that it's important to have a diversified supply chain. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know that it has. I don't know that as soon as everything gets back to normal, people will start sourcing back from the place that's 5% cheaper than somewhere else at their own peril. And that's a concern of mine. So if I'm a business owner, I have to find a way to figure out how to do that. I think it would be. I get that there's cost implications. I get it's challenging, right? It's more difficult, right? It's not just push and play, but man, it's vitally important, because never mind the supply chain, the tariff situation. There's a lot that can go wrong when it's only one country, especially when that one country, we've had varying degrees of friendliness on trade relations stage. So I would love to. I know diversification is increasing. I saw the data. I know people say they are. I hope it continues and it doesn't revert to where it was, because I'm not convinced that it won't.
Yeah, and just to even add to that, even as companies, diversify, I think the deeper you get down the supply chain, the more you realize all roads really do like run to China in a way, because like you may be building a certain product or assembling it in India or wherever it may be, or even in the Americas now we're seeing more manufacturing starting to happen in Central America, Caribbean, etc. But a lot of times you're still sourcing some of the raw material from China.
Yeah.
So it's literally so many things are interconnected and go through China. It's really it's hard to fully kind of cut them out or cut China producers out of the supply chain. So I think there's definitely diversification is happening. I think it will continue to happen, but I would really emphasize the point that I do think China will remain the dominant producer for our industry and many others for the foreseeable future.
100%.
Yeah.
If you look at our coverage, you can see some of the alternative the countries that companies are using as alternatives, things like Mexico, India, Vietnam, and Bangladesh. And you can see where they relate in relation to China. That our data shows China is still the dominant player, even as they explore these alternatives. And as you said, Chris, it'll likely be a slow process. Hopefully, we'll see if it means an active one. I want to move to the next topic here. We're going to talk about sales sales like order values and margins. Obviously, these are things that took a major hit last year. Here's one example. I'll read this one. I don't have a chart for it. So in 2019, the average order was nearly $1,300. $12,041. In 2020, it was $931. So a drop of nearly $300 on the average order. Margins took a similar toll here, and we do have this chart. If Melissa, you don't mind pulling it up, the data shows how margins were pretty much on a steady ascent. They dropped a little bit in 2019. Well, in 2020, they took a more stark plummet. Nate, we'll start with you. What explains this drop?
Oh, you mean other than the pandemic? You mean other than that? Okay,
well, sure, it's the pandemic. What in the pandemic?
Listen, I mean, I don't even know that it was distributed. I don't know that it was end clients even pushing for lower prices. I think that's always been the case. I don't think that was the case. I mean, it's the product makeup. It was what was being sold, right? I mean, you're selling blank PPE. You're probably selling that at a slightly lower rate. It's not that you had to, but I think a lot of people did. Similar with other PP, I think it was. I think that there was just a hit on profit margins, and it's potentially also that some of the higher profit margin items in this industry and the more expensive items weren't selling. There was no demand for them. There was nothing going on where people needed them for a good part of the year. I mean, Q2 and Q3 are not insignificant parts of this year, and if you go back to figure mid-March through the Labor Day, there wasn't a whole lot that was going on other than PPE. So I think it just has to deal with the product makeup, to be honest.
Great, Chris. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Nate's right. There is in some of our reporting on this. I think this might be a representative example. There was a distributor and her firm. They got a huge order for bulk blank PPE. I think it ended up composing in just a gross revenue sense like a quarter of their sales for the year. But they got an initial quote. They were from a producer they were going to use in China. The masks were viable. They were vetted. They were good. But then there was an order, I think a federal order that came out that you couldn't buy that or something that affected that deal. So they then had to go source domestically for those same masks. On the initial order, they were only making a 12 to 15% margin. But then when they went back to, and they had to kind of resource, from a different provider, it knocked it down the margin down even more. And so it was just kind of representative of how the whole PPE thing was kind of the Wild West there when it came to sourcing. You couldn't, because everybody was trying to get into it. You couldn't charge a lot to begin with. I think there was also an ethical dimension there too. People felt like it would be wrong to be making 50% margin on PPE orders, and then you had complications kind of come up mid order where prices were changing or sources were changing. So I think you add all that in, and it's a significant reason why it went down. I do think, though, I'll add one other thing. Sorry, that I think once business did start to come back, it's human nature. People were just so desperate to get business churning again, and they were, I think, afraid of getting caught out on price. and conscious of the fact that their clients had been through often very difficult economic times too, that they didn't want to come in high on pricing, so they were coming in very, very low, trying to make sure that they weren't going to intimidate anybody with price tags. So I think if you combine those factors in, you get those numbers you see there.
Yeah, and in addition, I mean, one of the things I didn't mention was that one of the top 5 industries this year was government, right?
Mm-hmm.
Government's never been a top industry and top client in this industry. But when you start dealing with governments, you're going into a different process here. You start to deal with the procurement process. So they start to scrutinize, and it's open bidding. It's a very different scenario here. So while there was obviously some government contracts where they were like, okay, let's just get whatever we can, there was a lot that would have been done via a procurement process. So that would have also put price pressures on.
That's a great point. Yeah.
And I know just from what we've been reporting, the kitting has really picked up. Obviously, it's been a huge trend. Kitting's a margin builder. Grouping products together, getting quality products. So even though those margins dropped last year, if you combine the sort of the huge amount of PPE that was sold in 2020. And compare 2021 with the increase in kitting, I expect those margins to increase next year. Do you agree, Nate?
Yeah, kitting's here to stay, I think, in many cases. Right, that was something we never measured before this year.
Sure.
So no, I think that kitting is certainly here. Listen, margins are going to rebound, right? Everything's going to be rebounding. Yep. I mean, this isn't a secret here, but when you look at what we do, when we look at the my favorite, graphic, which are the flow charts, which show the monthly ESP searches, right? Regular products are back in vogue. They're back in charge. That's not going to change. So with those, you're going to see a return of traditional profit margins, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm. Melissa, if you can bring up the next chart, I think it should be the product chart, because this actually will speak to what we're talking about. This is about products that were sold last year, and I think if you look at in comparison to this year, if you look at last year, the health and safety products were, I think, a very minor. They were a very minor component of our industry. So totally different story in 2021. Here's the chart. So again, health and safety, which was a category I don't think we ever sort of combined into a major thing. In 2019, 2.8%. In 2020, a quarter of all products sold in the industry. Now compare that to shirts, right? T-shirts individually are the biggest product category in the industry. If you take all the different types of shirts combined, there were less shirts sold last year than health and safety products. An incredible reversal, right, Nate?
It's insane. I mean, yeah, it makes, I get it, right? Intuitively, intellectually, sure, I get it. But we had to add in a category for hand sanitizers and face masks. I mean, okay, right? That's like, we are very, very careful with this study to not change too much in terms of some of these questions, because when you do it, you impact the results, right? But unfortunately, with with this year, we had really almost no choice. Like we had to break out these categories because they were the lifeblood of the industry, and they I don't know that they I would say they saved the industry. They saved some businesses in this industry, though. So no, it was very important. When you start to see numbers like 25%, which equates to $5 billion, right? Jeez, man, that's insane.
It's eye popping as it is, given what we knew last year is like. It's not totally shocking though, right? Because
not at all.
There was no events to give away cheap T-shirts at, to put it bluntly. There was no things where I needed, there was Little League everywhere is canceled, so I don't need team tees anymore or something like that. And when you exponentialize those things out to every community across America, you get numbers like we're seeing here.
Yeah. So none of these being given out last year.
Yeah.
Nate, you reference this when we talk about, so we do that monthly ESP data, and it shows what are the top products being searched for. PPE products are no longer in the top 10. They haven't been for a couple months. So I think so. We know obviously there's going to be less PPE sold this year than last year. The
Sure.
question that I think is up for discussion is how much PPE is going to be sold. Is it going to completely fall off the cliff, or is it going to fall somewhere in the middle?
I mean, listen, it depends. I don't know that. I mean, from an industry level, it's going to fall off a cliff. Like, just to be blunt, like
Okay.
right now, I would say it's going to fall off a cliff.
That would be my prediction too.
That's hard to say considering that that's $5 billion. But that $5 billion, right? That's not going to disappear. That's going to be moving into other products. I think the biggest challenge that this industry is facing right now are the supply chain issues. That's a problem. That's getting the products out there because the events are coming back. I mean, it's full capacity at sporting events. Concerts are fully back as of this month. There's concerts going up in Pershing. Guns N' Roses performing it to a sold out crowd in Hershey, Pennsylvania. These things are back. Getting the products is going to be the thing. PPE is going to go away. No matter what variants are out there, right? The variants are going to be out there. They're going to be affecting people, and I think there's going to be an opportunity for individual distributors to sell PPE, especially on depending on where they do business, where they live. If you live in New Jersey right now, PPE is dead. I mean, and I think that's probably true in New York and along much of the East Coast. So that's really what it is. But no, I think it's going to fall off a cliff.
Yeah, I just in our reporting, Nate kind of has macro numbers. We hear a lot of anecdotal stuff and just talking with distributors. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've heard over the last, say, 8 to 10 weeks, PPE is dead. I'm not doing anything with PPE. Maybe I get like a branded mask that goes in as part of like a thank you package to healthcare workers or something like that. But they're saying for the most part they're not doing it. Now are there notable exceptions of a few distributorships that got so heavily into PPE that they actually started separate divisions of their business or even started a spin-off business where they're like got into what is truly like medical supply. Yes, there are business, but barring those guys, if you were just a distributor who was doing PPE, you're not doing anywhere near, if anything at all, what you were doing at this time last year. And one of the big reasons for that is there's just not the mass demand anymore for it. And then number two, the traditional supply chain for that PPE equipment has caught up. So the people that you might have been selling bulk blank PPE to are now going back to a lot of their traditional sources for their PPE needs. So I don't anticipate it being like anywhere near the way it is. But to Nate made a great point that it's not like that's just like, okay, it's gone, and there's dollars that are going to be just directed elsewhere, I think, and as we're seeing with some of the ESP search data, it appears to be being directed toward your more traditional promo items. So, which is where we want to be as an industry. We're not the medical supply industry. We're a promotional products industry.
But boy, we were able to become a medical supply.
Yeah, we switched hats pretty well.
Damn quick, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's go to the last chart we have, and this is about the markets and the most popular markets that distributors sell to. To Nate's point, like what were the results going to be? This is something that we forecasted in, I think, whether it was in May or right during the pandemic. We forecasted what the rest of the year looked like, and then we we surveyed the results and showed what happened in 2020. So the text is a little small here. But the biggest point is there's really two clear-cut industries that rose above them all: healthcare and education. Education was the number one industry, had been the number one industry for a decade, for a long time. Healthcare overtook it. And so, is that, Nate? Is that going to be the case next year? Is healthcare still going to be number one, or is education going to resume its spot at the top?
I don't know the answer to that, right? I would think it's probably going to be education. I think things are going to revert to more normalcy, I guess you could say. That makes whatever that means.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be number 1 and 2 without a doubt. Like they've been number 1 and 2 for quite a while. I think though that especially with almost all colleges and universities going back full time in Q3 in September, with most primary schools going back full time. there's going to be a huge growth in the education. There's a lot of pent up demand in that sector, especially, and there's a lot of demand not only amongst the consumers in that sector, but amongst companies to reach people in that sector. It's incredibly important. So no, I think that's going to come back. Gangbusters. I think there's going to be a lot of other events also, a lot of other industries that have, that were down, right? That we're going to see an increase. Like, it's funny, I don't know what it is nationwide, in every single state, but around here, real estate is it's a huge growth industry. Yeah, real estate was down this year. And if you think, well, why would that be? How could it be doing so good here, but not? Because where were they giving the things away to? Right? There were no events. Whenever I go to our local 4-H fair, because I live in the sticks of Jersey, we have a 4-H fair. There's real estate. There's multiple real estate agents there giving out stuff. All of that was gone, and that's where a lot of I think that just speaks. It's a little microcosm of one industry, but I think that speaks to a lot of industries here. When things were down, even though the industries might be doing okay, did they really need the stuff because they couldn't give them away in the traditional ways? Whereas things like hospitality, which I thought was going to be a lot further down than it was, they were only closed for a little bit of time, and they still needed a lot of things. No matter whether people were traveling or not, they needed a lot for their own employees' safety and for their facilities. So in that respect, I think it was just a crazy year. I think things are going to revert back to being more, quote unquote, normal next year. And I think education will retake number one, but it's not going to be quite as big as it has been in the past years.
Cool. And Melissa, if you can take down the chart, you're off duty now as far as charts go. Chris, in your discussions with distributors, what are you hearing? What markets are popular right now?
Okay, at the moment, it may sound like an odd answer because it's not maybe what we would think of as a traditional market. But if you look across industries, what there's huge demand for right now is anything that can help with recruitment, hiring, and retention because of those labor shortages we mentioned before. There's a lot of desire to show appreciation to employees that are there, and also desire to welcome new hires that are coming on. And as all of our research shows, using tangible branded products to do that plays a significant role in helping those things. So that is a huge opportunity right now. What's starting to really burgeon, and this has really happened in the last, say, 6 weeks or so as a major opportunity, is those return of events that we've talked about. Things are truly coming back on. Nate mentioned it. There's concerts again. Sporting events around much of the country are at or close to capacity again. There's demand for promotions for those things once more. So just the return of in-person events. Even saw an article in our local news the other day just about nightclubs in the Philadelphia area and bars are reopening, and they have inside shows scheduled again. They're all looking for merchandise to welcome people back. So anything in-person related is big. The education market and what we would think of as a traditional market is yes, it's popping, and it's going to continue to. Really, that's been happening for weeks already in anticipation of the college, the restart of university and the return to secondary school, all that stuff. Healthcare, even though there's not the PPE demand that there once was, there is still desire, and there's, I think, strong desire for there not only to thank employees for everything that they've done and rewards and appreciation gifts, but also because you don't realize this, but a lot of healthcare providers were down last year. They made a lot less revenue last year because people weren't coming in for elective procedures, or they just weren't visiting the doctors as much. But they still have marketing dollars to spend, and now people can do those things again. So it's a high level of competition to actually attract their patients, but they view them as customers to back to their facility. So they're using various marketing channels, including promotional products, to do that. So I think that's another hot one. And this one may sound counterintuitive, but the hospitality industry as well. Everything's starting to open back up. Visitor bureaus, they're looking to attract people. They want to market. They realize now is the time. So those are some areas I'd be devoting attention. And to Nate's point too, yeah, definitely real estate. I mean, there's more realtors in this country than there are homes for sale, and they're competing in a blazing hot housing market. So any advantage they could gain I'm sure they would like to have.
Yeah, I think hospitality and to that point, government are going to actually, there's still going to be money there. And I'll tell you why, because I don't know if you've noticed, but on TV, there's a lot of advertisements. Come visit our state. Come here. We're open for business. You know, come to Virginia. Well, you know, there's a lot of that where they're now all of a sudden fighting again, where they might not have in the past had to fight for dollars. Right now they have to, and they recognize that, you know, revenge travel is real, right? People want to go places. Just trying to figure out where to go, and these businesses and states are going to be fighting for them.
Yeah.
So to wrap up here, Nate, I'll start with you. What do you think the rest of the year is going to look like, business wise, economically, and what should distributors and suppliers be on the lookout for?
It's going to be challenging. I mean, I'm not going to lie; like, it's going to be challenging, but it's going to be challenging for different reasons. It's going to be challenging because people are going to have to be patient. They're going to have to level set with their clients, and that's suppliers level setting with distributors, and that's distributors level setting with the end buyers, right? Because things are going. You need to plan ahead. That has been a mantra in this industry and of the SOI for as long as I can remember. Plan ahead, get your orders in. Don't wait till the last minute. Well, now it's necessary. Now it's not just a nice to have. Now, if you want your products in hand, you need to plan ahead, and I'm not talking, not 7 days, right? Weeks, months ahead. If you know you're going to do it, don't hesitate. You have to order it now. I think it's just going to be people just getting back to normal, though. I think it's going to be people are aching for that. I don't necessarily foresee any big disruptions from a product point of view. You just hope that the supply chain opens up. If the supply chain opens up, that'll be great for this industry. That'll be great for the economy. That'll be great for everyone. That I think is the biggest risk right now. So if I had to say, I think things are going to continue to open up, but you got to be patient, and that's going to be the biggest challenge.
Chris, what are your views about how the rest of the year is going to play out?
Yeah, I think on a positive sense, we're going to see continued very, very strong demand from end clients, really across most industries, especially ones that were down hard during the pandemic and are now looking to come back. That's, of course, barring a nightmare scenario involving like a variant of COVID or something that's going to reforce us back into the horrors that we saw last year. So as long as that nightmare scenario doesn't happen, I continue to see that, good positive momentum and demand for our products. There will, though, also through the year continue to be, challenges with product availability, inventory, rising prices on products, and ability to fulfill orders on time. And I don't think that that's anybody's fault. It's just the reality of the marketplace that we're operating in right now. So to Nate's point, to the extent that you can get clients to plan ahead, particularly for custom projects and for big time, high volume, high spend Q4 holiday time initiatives, you really want to try to do that. I do think that that we're going to be up as an industry this year. I'll go out on a limb and make that prediction.
If we're not, there's big issues. Chris.
Yeah. So how much? I think it's more of a question of just how much. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be bumpy. It's going to be bumpy sledding. But we're on an upward trajectory, and we have to keep that ultimate positive point in mind.
Okay, great. So even though we talked for a while here and covered a bunch of topics, this is just merely the appetizer. That is the buffet of state of the industry, and you can see a lot more data, a lot more coverage, all these major issues in our SOI package. So once again, for print, you'll be receiving it soon if you haven't already. Online for ASI members, you can get it at asicentral.com/SOI 2021, and it's on our asicentral.com/news homepage. You won't miss it.
And I believe if you just go to stateoftheindustry.com, that should also redirect right to that page.
Oh, awesome! Now we got to make sure of it, Nate. Since you said it, you spoke it into existence. So we have.
I could have told you that earlier. I just wanted you to keep reading it off.
Awesome. So thank you, Nate and Chris, for your insights, and thank you, everybody for joining us today. Have a great day.